Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a fantastic show today where we're going back to the USSR. Wait, no, that's the wrong Beatles song. We're going to have a little revolution.
Nice.
In order to do that, I can't do this one alone. So, as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how are you doing today?
Hey Zach, that was a really awesome little spin you did there. Did you get it? Spin records, spin. Yeah. Okay. That was great. Hey everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming to join me and join Zach to down this little trip down memory lane. That's what it's going to be. Hey, if you need to get a hold of us, you can get us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. We're on all sorts of places on the interweb. Zach, we're everywhere out there. We were the other day. I was at a restaurant and they gave me these fortune cookies. They opened it up and you know what it said on the thing? It said, "Listen to the Buff. Your life will be wonderful," is what it said in the fortune. Hey, if you're new to our podcast, welcome. Thanks for coming. We are glad you are here. Hey, give us 4 episodes. See if we don't give you a reason to come back for more. We're talking about lots of different things, and surely something will resonate with you. And remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. Zach, everybody should subscribe and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Zippity Doodah Pod Machine, whatever it is. You got to give us a 5-star review because when you do, Zach, I get chocolate pudding and
I get a bunch of brownies.
You get brownies. That's right. So please do that for us and take care of us. Zach, that's where we are today. We have something interesting to talk to our folks about not the USSR and revolution, but the U.S. and revolution.
Yeah, so we're going back to the U.S. Revolution, to 1776. The Washington Spy Ring, Benedict Arnold, the burning of the White House came a little bit later. Maybe we'll get to that in a future episode. But until then, we're going to talk some spies, shenanigans, and everything in between.
Yeah. So those of you who want to follow along and get the long version of this is the wonderful book by Brian Kilmeade and Don Yaeger called George Washington's Secret Six: The Spy Ring That Saved the American Revolution. It is a phenomenal book that talks about how Washington put his spy ring together and how that spy ring did great things during the Revolutionary War. Okay, so we got the American Revolutionary War, which, depending on how you count it, how you start, it could start as early as 1770 with the Boston Massacre. If you want to start there, it could start at Lexington and Concord, although that wasn't really, there was nothing declared at that point. It could start with the Declaration of Independence, but by the time you get to mid 1776, the Continental Army, led by General Washington, and the greatest military in the history of the planet up until that point, the British. Not the British. Well, it wasn't Alexander the Great.
You're saying the greatest military in the history of the planet up until that point, and you're going with the British Army in 1776?
Zach, they controlled the whole world. They
controlled it because they had a really good navy.
Well,
their army was not very good.
I'll give you that. Okay, so all right. So you're going up against the world's superpower at the time. Okay, let's state it that way. The world superpower, the British Navy and the Army, the Redcoats, the people who King George's military that was supposed to keep the colonies in check, and they were upset about all sorts of things: taxation without representation and sequestering of troops and all sorts of other things. And we're not going to go into the real reasons why. We're going to go into the mechanics of what was happening. So the U.S. was at war, Revolutionary War. They declared themselves free and independent states, and they should be able to do all those things that free and independent states do. The Revolutionary War ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1781, I think. Well, that time frame. All right. So, and during that time, the U.S. goes, all right. So this wasn't like we didn't like go 16-0 and then win the Super Bowl. Okay, I think you could look at it. The U.S. goes about 2-7-1 in major battles, give or take over the course of that. But what matters in wars like that is that you win the last battle, and the U.S. won at Yorktown and captured the British commanders and all the British Army stuff, and they were like, we're out, we're done, we can't afford to do this anymore, we're bailing out. But to get to that stage, our commander-in-chief, our first commander-in-chief, General Washington, he had some bad times. So we're going to start like in New York. All right, New York was key to both sides. It was a major economic center, just like it is now. It's kind of the middle of not the New England colonies, but the next section of them down. It was kind of the center of that area, and it was very important to both sides.
Yeah, and when you say New York, you are talking about the state and not the city. Yes, the city of New York is important, but the state as a whole is also important because up north of New York, across the border, is this place called Canada, which becomes important later on. And so the positioning of New York geographically allowed some interesting political and military maneuvers.
Yeah, right. And the Hudson River goes, it's like that path straight north. Well, not exactly straight north, okay, but straight north up. And then you got Lake Champlain, and then you got Canada is up there, and you got to worry about that corridor. And New York State covers the Hudson River there, the Hudson River Valley, and that takes you. The Hudson River Valley is New York's pathway down to New York City. But that the city was key, as was the state, and the city was the key to the state. So keeping this city itself was an important thing for both sides. And the British moved into New York in August of 76 through the Jamaica Pass. All right. And this was a thing. The Americans knew they were going to make a move. They figured they wouldn't go through Jamaica Pass because it was not a good way to go. But the British got sneaky and they snuck through there, and Washington got trapped with his men and his army at Brooklyn Heights. And this is one of these first, like if you were, we've talked about this before about Lewis and Clark, about this idea that there was this divine providence thing hanging over the American story. And this is one of those things. So Washington and his troops are stuck in Brooklyn Heights. They can't get away from the British. They're holding them off. And the night of August 29th, they decide we're going to start ferrying our guys across the river and back into Manhattan. And morning comes, and they're not done. Like they still have lots of troops to get across and lots of equipment to get across. And this gigantic, massive fog bank. You remember that the Bears-Eagles game, Zach, in like 80? You ever seen the fog game?
I wasn't live at the time.
Did you ever see
remember something that you're not live?
Okay. Well, have you seen footage of the fog game?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it was like the fog game, but it descended on the place where Washington was retreating with his troops across the river, and the fog rolled in, and the British couldn't see him escaping. And Washington and his army escaped, as they say, to fight another day. And once they got back across to Manhattan, they moved north into Connecticut and then west into New Jersey. So Washington spent the first part of that of the war kind of out, almost exiled into the wilderness out there in New Jersey, hanging out with his guys. And by September, he realized at that point that we need better intelligence, and we're going to start
communication.
Right, because we need to know what the enemy's doing. It's really hard to think about that now, but the communication was, what do they say? The song says communication is the problem to the answer. That is, you ever heard that song?
Nope.
Oh man. The things
I
we
don't
do.
think we want to hear your.
No, I'm just saying it is the things we do for love by, I want to say 10cc, but I don't think that's quite right. Somebody will correct me. But that's it. Communication is the problem to the answer. And he needed that because he didn't know what the British were doing. So he hired this young man named Nathan Hale, a 21-year-old Yale graduate, who, like his second or third day of being a spy, got captured by the British and hanged. And he is quoted as saying that he regrets he has one life to live for his country. And this kind of this kind of set up this issue with Washington that he needs spies, but he's got to do a better job of just sending Nathan Hale out there to see what's going on and have him get captured. So he sets up a spy ring. Okay. And this took a couple years to get going. And that's the focus of this book of George Washington's Secret Six. The focus is on the spy ring and the 6 people that we know who they were now. And there's one of them we don't. She is considered to be Agent 355, and nobody knows who she is, which means she was a really good spy, and she didn't leave a record behind her. But some of the other guys, they left records behind them. And that's how we figured out who they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, especially this time period of military expansion, that I don't think gets talked about enough throughout history. In the dawn of the first few centuries, it was a lot of this like brute force or having kids run 26.2 miles and hoping they don't die at the end, tell you what happens. Military operations got more complex than that, and the ability to position people strategically so that you can be informed of whereabouts before we had satellite imagery, before we had text messages, before those type of things, and using that to your advantage when you make your military plans and your plays for whatever they may be for you advancing your front. And spies have been a common thing throughout history since this. They kind of rose to prominence, and like you would see that in the Cold War, World War I, and World War II. The way spies were used to communicate this intelligence and knowledge that they had on the other side, and they were also at the same time putting themselves in a difficult position because if they get found out, they're probably dead.
Well, that's the thing, and there's the British were known for being very honorable. Okay, that was, at least they thought themselves honorable. That was the thing. Honor was a really big thing for them. And it was a big thing for anybody who was prestigious military. So the idea of being a spy was considered essential, but it was a low. It wasn't who you wanted to be. If you didn't want to be a spy, it was like being a rogue, being somebody who was not looked upon with well, you weren't considered to be honorable. Dignity. Yeah, there was not a lot of dignity in being a spy, but you needed to have them. So they, so we put them in there. It's really interesting if you read this book, Zach, how the war goes on, but real life goes on as well at the same time, right? So it was New York City, and the British had occupied the city, but there were still pubs where people went out for dinner. There were still places where they made beer. There were newspapers that printed stuff. There were people who sold wares, and they shod people's horses, and they did all the things they were supposed to do at the same time while this invading army is taking hold of the city. So all these people are coming and going, living their regular life. And in the middle of that are these people who are watching for particular things and then sending letters home with code or with secret invisible ink inside it, and then getting that information to the appropriate people. And you don't want to be found out to be on the wrong side. So there were loyalists and there were patriots, and they were, sometimes they intermixed, sometimes they were in the same families. It was a complicated thing to be. It wasn't like the trench warfare we saw in World War I or the battle lines we saw in World War II. We saw where it was just army and army. This is like the armies were like intermingled with the populace. And I found that a really fascinating piece of this story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing about military conquest of the time is they were in New York City and they would just kind of walk around. It wasn't like there was a front, like you think of like the Western Front in Europe during World War II. That wasn't a thing. Like it was just British people in New York, and they kind of just controlled that, and they influenced, because of their control in the city, what would happen. And in a sense, because they're in New York City, they're in New York. New York was almost acting like a colony again because of the influence of the military presence there.
Well, in the British eyes, they still were colonies. They were just colonies in rebellion, and they needed to be squashed, and they needed to be brought. What do they say? Brought to heel, right? So you need to bring them in line, and they need to get back to doing what they should do. And that's why the soldiers were there, to get you to do what you should do. So Washington like he escapes, and the army escapes back into New Jersey, and then kind of goes down south toward Philadelphia. And by December of 76, they're camped outside of they're camped just west of the Delaware River, and this is when Washington makes his famous crossing of the Delaware. And it turns out that they attacked on Christmas night. Do you remember this story? You know, they've seen the picture of him. They cross on the river in the ice in the very bad weather, and they rout the British and Hessian soldiers at Trenton, right, on Christmas night. And they had this plan worked out, and the plan was the plan worked really well due to a guy named John Honeyman, who was a local weaver. And it turns out that he got captured by the Continental Army, and then he escaped. And then he told the Hessians that, hey, I just got captured by the Americans, and they suck, man. They're ragtag, and they don't got anything going on. Whatever you're doing, don't worry about that. There ain't no attack coming. And they were like, oh, cool. So let's drink our beers. So they spent Christmas night just
Christmas celebration,
doing Christmasing, right? And because they thought no attack was coming. Well, all of this was a ruse. Okay, this guy John Honeyman he and Washington worked out this plan, right? With letters between each other, and Honeyman just happened to be in the area. Oh no, you captured me. And they were like, so they held him there. And then Washington helped him escape, finger quotes. Okay. And then he went back there and said, there's not going to be an attack, but it was all a ruse. He was on our side, even though the Hessians and the British didn't know that was happening. So there's an example of, I guess, counterintelligence or creative tactics in wartime being very valuable. That Washington didn't just surprise attack. It was a surprise attack because they set him up and told them that nothing was coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, intelligent move to, confuse people. Deception works in sports. Deception works in military. Like, it's using the tools at your disposal in an advantageous way to help your cause. Like, that's all it is. It's putting yourself in that position to be successful.
But it's really difficult. You can imagine this guy's just a weaver. He's got a little shop there by the creek, probably, and he makes whatever you weave. He makes fabric. He makes cloth. He makes bags to put, I don't know, flour in or whatever it is. He makes this stuff, and the British trust him because he looks like he got captured by the Americans. So they're like, well, if he got captured and held, then we should find out what they're doing. But that was all a ruse. Okay, so Washington is learning. I mean, he knows this, but he realizes how valuable this is to put spies in place, to put his intelligence people in place. And by 1777, by the next year, he starts building the spy ring. Okay, so the general principle worked like this. There was a guy in Manhattan who collected information. He had a like a mercantile shop, and it was right next to the pub that the British officers would go to, and he got to be friends with the guy who ran the pub, and the guy who ran the pub also ran a printing press. All right, so he would he'd like go over there and say, hey, I have your delivery of whatever you needed, and he would just listen in on conversations. And you know how people are when they think they are amongst friends, they tend to be braggadocious, and they tend to spill the beans, and he would pick up that information. And then what he would do is they had this, they had invisible ink. All right, so you write it, and then it shows up when you heat it up with a candle, or you put this other liquid on it.
It's like the same stuff on the back of the Declaration of Independence from A National Treasure.
Yeah, so that's why you should watch National Treasure, because it explains the whole concept of. I don't know if they had the thing with the special glasses that Nicolas Cage uses.
That was a different thing, but they did the back of the Declaration of Independence. They heated up some stuff, and then they were able to figure out. Was lemon juice and in the hair dryer, and they were able to figure out the message decoded on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
Of course, everybody knows that. Yeah. So, but I think you need Nicolas Cage to do that.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah. So so next time you have a Nicolas Cage over, ask him to see if there's any invisible ink on the back of your documents. So they used invisible ink, and they would write he would write like a bill of sale for a guy. It's like, oh, I sold you 3 horseshoes and a bag of beets or something like that. And so, but he would in between the lines, they would write like stuff like I saw, 16 cannon unloaded on this ship, and there are 3 new majors.
300 troops went north or anything like that as well.
Right. So they'd write that stuff down there, and then he would give it to the guy, and the guy was like, going back to, he'd go out to Long Island. Okay. Now this seems to me weird because I don't live in New York. Right. So I don't know these places, but it seems to me if I'm in Manhattan and I want to go to New Jersey, the way I don't want to go is to Long Island. But that's exactly where the spy ring went. All right. It went from New York City out across Brooklyn into Long Island to Setauket. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Setauket or Setauket, something like that. And they went out there, and that was controlled by the British. So that was the heart of British controlled area was Long Island. And they would take it out there, and then that guy would give it to a guy that rowed in a boat across Long Island Sound to Connecticut. So he would pick it up from the guy in Setauket. He would pick up the messages and stuff, and he would row with them across to Connecticut. And then in Connecticut, he would hook up with another guy who worked with Washington, who would get on a horse, and he'd ride those things back to the American side, right, to General Washington. And then he would look at them with the magic Nicolas Cage glasses and the lemon juice and the hairdryer. And then he would read the message. Now sometimes this took like 2 weeks for this information to go. And then Washington,
it's not longer, depending on, if weather and you're trying to row across the sound. Like there were so many things that like we'd be like, oh, I can just get in the car and drive. Like they didn't have that. And by horse, they might not even be traveling.
Yeah, and sometimes they would they do the drive, and they do it in one day. They'd ride 55 miles in one day. And they'd be like, that was a huge journey for them to make just to get this information. But normally it would take several days just to get it out to Setauket, and then another day to get it across to Connecticut, and then a couple days across. So they tried to speed that up, and then Washington would send a note back all the way. It's like this big game of telephone. So that's how the ring generally worked. Okay, and they would send messages back and forth, and they would check for things like troop movement and who was being supplied with what, and who came in and bought gunpowder, and what any rumors that they had. So that was the general spy ring. That's how it worked. And the other thing was everybody had a code name, so nobody knew who anybody was, right? And the only person you knew was the guy you contacted. That's it. There was none of this. Only Washington knew everybody, and he only knew them by code names. So even if they met, they wouldn't know each other, right? And that helps keep things secure in case anybody gets captured. So they in March in 1780, that one thing the British did, and this you always forget that this stuff is going on. The Americans were printing their own money. They were printing continentals, right? They printed their own money because the U.S. had to have its own money, and the British got a hold of some counterfeit continental printing plates to do their own printing, and whole reams of paper. And word snuck out that the British were making counterfeit money. And that's not an uncommon thing to do in a war, because it helps destabilize the government that's in power.
That was common throughout the Civil War as well.
Right. So the market is flooded with money that is of no value, but depreciates the money that is of value. And the whole economy just collapses, and then nobody can do anything. So that's a piece of there's some war strategy for you if you ever want to go to war with somebody, get some printing plates. Anyway, so they were printing these things on a ship, and somebody spills the beans at the pub, and the guy finds out, and they send the information out, and it gets over to Washington, and Washington has to make this decision: are they really, is this real information, or was this fake information that was planted? Because sometimes that happens. Okay. So, but they shut down in 1780, in March of 1780, Congress canceled all colonial bills. They said, these are no longer worth any money. We're printing new ones. And that's what they did. And that was a better thing to do than to allow the British to saturate the market with counterfeit bills. So that's one of the things that the spy ring did. So, in 1780, in late spring, news came out that we had reached agreement with France to have the French come and help us out with the British. Now,
because there's nothing the French love more than punishing the British for something, regardless of if they're win or lose. They just want to take on the British. Let's be honest here.
And we did that back. We talked about Joan of Arc and how they all it's just a long term. It's a thing. The fact that the Channel ever got built, Zach, is just a testament to how short memories can be, because I can't believe the British and the French both decided to open up their continent to invasion from the other one. It seems I'm just amazed.
That's not even getting into the engineering of it all.
Yeah, well, maybe we should do a channel.
Well, maybe we should make a channel.
Okay, that'd be kind of cool because they wouldn't have to drive in the snow.
Yeah.
So the French, they launched their ships, okay, and they're coming to fight the British on our behalf, which was awesome.
And
they were heading
mercenaries, but that's a complete. Okay, there's this whole legal thing with mercenaries in wartime, and I can go in. I wrote a paper on this, so I actually know something, but we can go into that later. But it was very interesting. They were hired as paid mercenaries rather than independent military contractors, which is nuances of language and words. But at the time, mercenaries were completely legal, so it was allowed.
Weren't the German Hessians the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the British got the Germans and we got the French. Okay, so it's kind of like
the Pope's English, so
yeah, that's right. So let's. What did they say? Jesus is French, but the Pope is English. Is that what it was? Yeah.
No, the Pope may be French, but
Jesus is English. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the British are coming. The French are coming to fight the British. All right, and they're heading to Newport, Rhode Island. Okay. So remember, the British are hanging out down in New York because they had taken New York, and Washington knows that they're coming. The French are coming to Rhode Island. So the spy ring starts to see that the Brits are preparing to leave Manhattan. All right. And then they're going to go, not going to leave, but they're going to leave it a little bit weaker. And they're going to send people up to Rhode Island to intercept the French and engage them when they get here. Right. Think about it. It's end of a long journey. You just want to get home, unpack your suitcase, take a shower. Right. And boom, you pull into the driveway. They're the British. Okay, so that's what they were thinking that they were going to do. All right. So, and Washington knows they're probably going to do that, but nobody really knew when they were going to land because nobody knew when they left, because the only people that knew when they left were the people that were on the ship. And news doesn't go faster than the ship, right? So they, the British are going to go up there, but the spy ring sees the British preparing to go up there. Okay. And so Washington has to make this decision. Do I attack New York to try to get it back? Right. Or do I hang back and let them go? Or do I do something else? And he does something else. Okay. What he does is he draws up plans for attacking New York. Okay. And he says, it's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Plans for Continental Army to attack New York. And he puts them in an envelope and he gives them to a guy. And he says, I want you to write in there until you get captured by the British. All right. So the British capture this guy and they're like, what do you have? He goes, oh, nothing. And then, the envelope falls out of his jacket or whatever it is. And they go, oh, these must be plans for attacking New York.
It says right here. It must be true.
On the front in nice script from General Washington. All right, so the British capture these plans, and they're like, holy cow, they're going to attack New York. So they say, we better get our guys back from Rhode Island. And so what they do is they send out, they launch flares and stuff, and they say, they write, the right kind of flares. They send up a flare that says, poof, please come back, or whatever. They didn't have those kind of fireworks. But they send up signal, and these guys turn around, and they come back to New York to defend New York from attack that Washington wasn't planning to do anyway.
And right? The French are able to safely get to Rhode Island.
That's right. They get to Rhode Island and they disembark and they can get their suitcases unpacked and get a shower and a good meal and a night's rest instead of having to fight as soon as they get there. So the French get there and everything's great. And now they are set up there to help defend New England because that was still an American stronghold. And so Washington's fake plans were they bought some time, but he was only able to do that because he knew that the British were going there because of the thing. So enter the main topic of today's show, which is going to be extended into the next show somewhere. Okay. So this is just the intro show for the next show. Just think of it that way. This is like The Hobbit for Lord of the Rings. This show is like The Hobbit for the Lord of the Rings. It's just kind of an intro show to get us all going. Okay.
Are you Tolkien or am I Tolkien?
I don't think anybody's here. Anybody in this room is Tolkien, Zach. All right, so Benedict Arnold, all right, he's the topic. Summer of 1780. Okay, so Major General Benedict Arnold wanted a better command. All right, he was in Philadelphia, and he was the military commander of Philadelphia, and he wanted more. Okay, so he had been with the British back in the day. In fact, everybody was with the British back in the day because they were all British, right? Washington was with the British back in the day, all right, and Benedict Arnold had served the French in the French and Indian Wars. It's like, you served my father in the Clone Wars. Okay, so this Benedict Arnold served the British in the French and Indian War back in 1757. And then he kind of became a businessman in 1760. He just did business stuff in Connecticut. All right, and then in 1767, he married Margaret, his wife. Okay, and they had the three kids together. Okay, so that's prior to 1770. In 1770 was the Boston Massacre, where British troops fired on a crowd and killed 5 people. And Arnold was very displeased because he thought the British shouldn't be doing things like that. Right? And he joined the Continental Army in 1775, and he helped defeat the British at Fort Ticonderoga.
Yeah, so actually, it was not the Continental Army at the time. It was, technically speaking, the Connecticut
militia. Right? Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, so he joined the Connecticut. Yeah, I have this wrong. Okay, you're right. You're absolutely right. It was the Connecticut militia. Right? He joined them and helped defeat the British at Fort Ticonderoga. And
it's the same people as the pencil company.
Right, it's the pencil guys. Okay, so if you're looking for a really good pencil, the Dixon Ticonderoga is the favorite pencil of the buff. All right, if you're looking for a number 2 pencil, the Dixon Ticonderoga is that's your stick, baby. Okay, so after defeating them, he started going back home, and as he's going back home, a messenger comes and says, "Hey, dude, great job at the battle. Your wife just died." And he's like, "Oh man, that sucks." And so things were pretty bad for him. Okay, so he started feeling despondent. He wanted more recognition for what he did at Ticonderoga, and he had some successful battles in that time after that. But he always felt underappreciated. Zach, can you imagine that? He always felt like he got passed over, like other people got different commands and promotions that he should have got. He was a good strategist. But let's just say he wasn't a good team player.
Yeah, there's this. Throughout this, as we work our way through the prequel and into the main story here, there's this egotistical play that comes from Benedict Arnold. Yes, there is the tales of him being a traitor, all of that stuff, but it gets lost in the fact that he had an ego. He thought he was deserving of these promotions. He thought he was deserving of all this credit. He thought all of these things, and it was his ego that drove him to make the decisions to betray George Washington and the Continental Army. And additionally, there's some money on the line, so
there was money on the line. Yeah, there was, so if you get passed over, like if you've ever been in a situation when you've been in a job and somebody else always gets the promotion and you're doing all the work and it just piles up on top of you, you can see, well, look, I'm going to quit the job. I'm going somewhere else. Okay. And that's what Benedict Arnold did. Okay. So he was a good strategist. And he was a bad team player. People either really liked him or they hated him. They couldn't stand him. It was like, because he wasn't a people person, Zach, I think is part of the description of Benedict. People person is not what you say about him. And he had a limp from a combat wound. He was supposed to have his leg amputated, but he said, "I want my leg." So they set it for him, and it didn't do very good. I don't know if he broke it or just had it hacked apart or what it was. But he was supposed to get it amputated, and he didn't. He just had it set. In 1778, Washington appointed Benedict Arnold as military commander of Philadelphia. Okay, and that's where he is in 1780 when we get there. And in 1780, he meets what eventually is his downfall and his path forward. He meets Peggy Shippen. All right, and Peggy Shippen was this 17-year-old socialite in Philadelphia. She was from a loyalist family, so she was not a patriot, or at least her family was not a patriot. Okay, and she got the hots for Benedict Arnold, and next thing you know, in April of 1779, Peggy marries Benedict Arnold. Okay, the Brits had left Philadelphia in 1778 to reinforce New York, and Peggy was there. She had been hanging out with the British, and in particular, one of these guys named Marc Andre, who will become very important later. He was a British officer, but he left to go to New York, and Benedict Arnold stepped in as military commander of Philadelphia, and she ended up marrying Benedict Arnold in April of 1779. And by May of 1779, Benedict Arnold was asking the British General Clinton in New York if maybe he could be of service to the other side. I don't know how you broach these letters. It's like,
Well,
dear.
during the time, there was a lot more free flowing of communication and people being in the same city. So you might have literally the opportunity to run into him on the street, which is the nature of it. Additionally, this is Henry Clinton. The name Clinton is very interesting because there is another Clinton who was big in the signing of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. Those two are unrelated.
They're unrelated.
So there are multiple Clinton families that show up throughout early American history, and it's important to note that they were unrelated.
So Arnold was trying to get to the British General Clinton to see if maybe I do you have something for me, because I'm not getting my due here. Okay,
I want some.
And so he's married to Peggy Shippen, who used to hang out with John Andre, who is now in New York. And he's not only in New York, he's kind of like the chief British spy guy in New York, because the Americans had spies in New York, and so did the British, of course. And it's probably likely that they ran into each other, because it was so yeah, it's New York City. You see everybody there, right? He's like, hey, I went to New York. Hey, did you see my cousin? He lives in New York, right? That sort of thing, right? So John Andre's in New York. He was friends with Peggy Shippen. Peggy Shippen was married to Benedict Arnold. Andre has contacts with General Clinton. So Andre starts brokering this idea that maybe Benedict Arnold could come to the other side. But you got to be careful about how you're doing this.
And if he would come to the other side, what role would he play? How would he enable the British to do what they want? Additionally, with all of that stuff, money would be involved, and a lot of money would be involved, especially for a high-ranking American general like Benedict Arnold, and how that could help the British military efforts, their spy efforts, their communication efforts, and all those type of things. And that's where we're going to pick up the next time when we bring back our friend Benedict Arnold and the Revolutionary War. But yeah, until then, Rafe, do you have anything else?
Well, just keep in mind, when you're sending letters back and forth between your buddies, you never know who else might be reading them. And always look for that secret invisible ink in between the lines, because you never know what might be in there.
When you need this cage to help you out.
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to leave this right here, Zach. All right. We're going to leave you with Benedict Arnold and John Andre chatting with each other through Peggy Shippen, talking about how they're going to go help the British. And the rest of the story gets really wacky, amazing. It's just like, who knew this was all going on? Zach, we're going to leave it like that.
Yeah, that's where we're going to leave it. So again, thank you all for listening. I want to remind you to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.